Hi friends, welcome to another video lecture of the series Emergency Medicine, and in this lecture we will discuss what is shock, what are the various types and how to approach a patient of shock. We will first discuss the introduction, then the pathophysiology of shock, classification of shock into four types, that is distributive, cardiogenic, obstructive and hypovolemic. What are the stages of shock? Compensated, then decompensated, and finally irreversible stage. How to evaluate a patient using history, physical examination and investigations. And finally the treatment, which involves volume resuscitation, vasopressor and inotropic support, oxygenation and ventilatory support, antibiotics and specific therapy according to the type and etiology of shock. So friends, shock is a clinical condition of organ dysfunction due to imbalance between oxygen supply and demand. That is, there is either a decreased oxygen supply or there is increased oxygen demand or combination of both. It is commonly seen in ICU settings. Initially, shock is reversible with treatment. What treatment? That is restoration of adequate oxygen supply. But if left untreated, it can progress to irreversible stage leading to multi-system organ dysfunction. Now, when we consider the pathophysiology, the cellular oxygen imbalance is the most commonly related to impaired oxygen delivery due to circulatory failure. Shock can also develop during states of increased oxygen consumption or impaired oxygen utilization. A very important example of impaired oxygen utilization is cyanide poisoning. Cyanide poisoning. This cyanide poisoning leads to uncoupling of oxidative phosphorylation so that adequate ATP is not generated. Now, when we consider the mechanism of death, during metabolism, glucose is converted to pyruvate, and normally this pyruvate undergoes oxidative phosphorylation and generates ample amount of ATP. But in conditions of decreased oxygen, as in shock, there is generation of lactate through anaerobic metabolism. Since enough oxygen is not present, this leads to decreased ATP generation. Now, due to this less amount of ATP, there is less activity of sodium potassium ATPase, which consumes almost 20 to 80% of ATP, and this also leads to calcium influx, which activates calcium dependent enzymes like phospholipases and proteases. Finally, this leads to cell swelling and death. So this is the mechanism of cell death, which is seen in conditions like shock. Now let's see what are the determinants of oxygen delivery. Why it is important to know? Because the conditions affecting any of the component can lead to shock. So the oxygen delivery is dependent upon cardiac output and arterial oxygen content. This cardiac output is in turn dependent on stroke volume and heart rate. This is given by formula stroke volume into heart rate, and this stroke volume is further dependent upon preload, which is directly proportional to preload. It is also directly proportional to the contractility. This contractility is independent of both preload and afterload, and it is inversely proportional to systemic vascular resistance. On the other hand, the arterial oxygen content can be given by the formula hemoglobin multiplied by 1.39 into saturation of oxygen in arterial blood plus PaO2 multiplied by 0.3. So this is the oxygen combined with the hemoglobin, and this is the oxygen dissolved in the blood. So when we consider the determinants of oxygen delivery, it is dependent upon preload, contractility of heart, systemic vascular resistance, hemoglobin, saturation of oxygen and oxygen dissolved in the blood. So any of the components can lead to shock. Now coming on to the classification of shock, based on the pathophysiology, it is categorized into four major types. That is distributive shock, cardiogenic shock, obstructive shock, and hypovolemic shock. Now, familiarity with all these major shock types and their unique hemodynamic profile is essential so that the clinician can use history, physical examination, and lab testing to determine the type of shock and promptly begin appropriate therapy to restore oxygen delivery. So, let's see individual types of shock one by one. So, first, let's discuss distributive type of shock. It is characterized by severely decreased systemic vascular resistance leading to tissue hypoperfusion and shock. Tissue hypoperfusion. It is unique in the form that there is compensatory increase in cardiac output. It is the only shock type in which there is increased in cardiac output. Pulmonary capillary wedge pressure and central venous pressure are reduced because of peripheral pooling of the blood. When we consider the most common cause of distributive shock, it is septic shock. Septic shock. Other causes which can lead to distributive shock can be pancreatitis, severe burns, anaphylactic shock. Now, anaphylactic shock is a IgE mediated allergic reaction that rapidly develops after an exposure to allergen. It develops after an exposure to allergen, and it is due to histamine release. What is the mediator? It is histamine. Now, other causes can be neurogenic shock. Now, neurogenic shock can result when there is severe brain and spinal cord injury. Brain and spinal cord injury leading to disruption of autonomic pathway, finally leading to decreased systemic vascular resistance and decrease in venous return. Decreased systemic vascular resistance leading to peripheral pooling and decreased venous return, in turn leading to shock. Now, there can be endocrine shock, adrenal crisis. Now, the conditions that can lead to damage to adrenal gland leading to adrenal crisis can be chronic steroid abuse, metastatic malignancies, adrenal hemorrhage, infections like HIV and TB. TB is the most common cause of adrenal damage, autoimmune adrenalitis, or amyloidosis. So, this was the discussion on distributive type of shock. Now, coming on to second type, that is cardiogenic shock. This occurs due to decreased cardiac output. Now, what is causing this decreased cardiac output? This is because of decreased stroke volume, and this decrease in stroke volume is due to decrease in contractility independent of preload and afterload. Decrease in contractility. So, since the cardiac output is decreasing, there will be compensatory increase in systemic vascular resistance. So, what all can cause cardiogenic shock? There can be myocardial infarction. If there is left ventricular, then this will lead to increased pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. If there is right ventricular infarction, this will lead to increased central venous pressure along with raised JVP and peripheral edema. Myocarditis can also lead to cardiogenic shock. Arrhythmias, both bradyarrhythmias and tachyarrhythmia, can lead to cardiogenic shock, and valvular insufficiencies like aortic valve and mitral valve insufficiency can also lead to cardiogenic shock. Now, the third shock type is obstructive shock. This also occurs due to decrease in cardiac output, but now the etiology of this decreased cardiac output is not inside the heart. This is extracardiac. So, what all causes can lead to obstructive shock? These can be tension pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade, restrictive pericarditis, pulmonary embolism, and aortic dissection. It is important to note that tension pneumothorax, cardiac tamponade, restrictive pericarditis lead to obstruction to the venous return. So, this will lead to decrease in venous return, and this is the mechanism for decrease in cardiac output. On the other hand, the pulmonary embolism and aortic dissection will lead to outflow obstruction to the aorta and leading to decreased cardiac output. Now, the final type of shock type is hypovolemic shock. This occurs due to decrease in cardiac output. Now, this decrease in cardiac output and hypovolemic shock is not related to heart itself. It is due to decrease in preload, and this decrease in preload is due to decreased intravascular volume. Decreased intravascular volume. So, since there is decreased cardiac output, there will be compensatory increase in systemic vascular resistance, and the central venous pressure and the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure both will be decreased due to decreased intravascular volume. When we consider the causes, these can be hemorrhage. Now, hemorrhage can be either external hemorrhage, which can be due to trauma, or there can be internal hemorrhage like upper GI hemorrhage or lower GI bleed. There can be additionally GI losses like diarrhea or vomiting. There can be burns leading to hypovolemia, and polyuria can also lead to hypovolemia, example in diabetic ketoacidosis and diabetes insipidus. Now friends, this is a very important table which can be used to distinguish the pathophysiology of the different shock types. So first, let's consider the distributive shock. In this, the pathophysiology is severely reduced systemic vascular resistance due to either sepsis, anaphylaxis, or other cause. This leads to compensatory increase in cardiac output, and there will be decreased central venous pressure and decreased pulmonary capillary wedge pressure due to peripheral pooling of the blood. Now, in second type, that is cardiogenic shock, the primary pathophysiology is decrease in cardiac output due to decreased contractility of the heart. This leads to compensatory increase in systemic vascular resistance, and the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure will be elevated if there is involvement of left ventricle, and central venous pressure will be elevated if there is involvement of right ventricle. Similarly, in obstructive shock, there is decrease in cardiac output due to any extra cardiac cause. This leads to compensatory increase in systemic vascular resistance, and the CVP and PCWP will be elevated. Finally, coming to hypovolemic shock, the primary pathophysiology is decrease in cardiac output, but now it is due to decreased intravascular volume leading to decrease in preload of the heart. This further leads to increased systemic vascular resistance as a compensation, but the central venous pressure as well as pulmonary capillary wedge pressure will be low because of the decreased intravascular volume. So this is a very important chart which can be used to distinguish various types of shock when the patient presents to us. Now there are two terms, that is mixed shock and undifferentiated shock. So what is mixed shock? Often the patient presents with more than one type of shock, that is combination of more than one type of shocks. Example, when a patient presents with septic shock, the sepsis can lead to sepsis induced cardiomyopathy. So this will be an example of distributive shock as well as cardiogenic shock. So it is a mixed shock. On the other hand, undifferentiated shock can be defined that many patients upon presentation have undifferentiated shock where no specific type can be attributed, but after history, physical examination as well as investigations, a specific type can be attributed and outlined. So initially many patients have undifferentiated shock. Now friends, coming on to the stages of shock, regardless of the type of shock, whether it be distributive shock, cardiogenic shock, obstructive shock, or hypovolemic shock, the shock progresses through a continuum of three stages. That is, first, which is compensated shock, also known as pre-shock. Second stage is decompensated shock, which is the main shock, and final is irreversible shock. Now in compensated shock, body utilizes a variety of physiological responses to counteract the initial insult, and there are attempts to re-establish the adequate perfusion and oxygen delivery, and there are no overt signs of organ dysfunction. When we see the lab parameters, there are only mild organ dysfunction like mild increase in creatinine, increase in troponin, or mild increase in lactate. In this, there is compensatory response which compensates for the shock. This compensatory response depends on the type of shock. Depends on the type of shock. For example, when we consider the early sepsis, that is early septic shock, this leads to decrease in systemic vascular resistance since it is the pathophysiology of shock. Now, due to this systemic vascular resistance, what will be the compensation? The compensation will be increase in heart rate, leading to increase in cardiac output. Now, when we consider the early hemorrhage, this is a hypovolemic shock. This early hemorrhage will have a compensation in the form of increased systemic vascular resistance. Since hemorrhage will lead to decreased cardiac output, the compensation will be increased systemic vascular resistance, which we have already discussed in the previous slides. Now the second stage is decompensated shock. When the compensatory response is overwhelmed, this leads to decompensation, and this is known as true shock. True shock. And in this, the patient will be present with signs of decompensation like altered mental status, decreased urine output, or dry skin, etc. Now, both these compensated as well as decompensated shock is reversible when appropriate treatment is given on time. So, both of these are reversible. But if this decompensated shock is left untreated, this will lead to irreversible shock, which is characterized by organ dysfunction, which is permanent, and often the patient progresses to multi-organ dysfunction and multi-system organ failure. Now coming on to the evaluation, we will see the evaluation of shock first by history, then physical examination, then investigation. So what are the aims for the evaluation? The first aim is first to confirm the shock, whether the shock is present or not, and if present, we have to catch it in the reversible stages, that is either compensated stage or decompensated stage, so that treatment is possible. The second aim is to determine the specific etiology or at least the type of shock, whether it is distributive or cardiogenic or obstructive or hypovolemic. But it is important to note, during the assessment of the shock etiology, the treatment should not be delayed and it should be started as soon as possible. Now first talking about the history, obtaining a concise and focused history is important from the patient or the attendants of the patient. There are some easily identified organ dysfunction, for example, newly altered mental state or decrease in renal function, which is characterized by oliguria. So we can easily identify the organ dysfunction by altered mental status and oliguria. In some cases, the type of shock is apparent from history itself. Let's see certain examples of this. So we have different clinical scenarios on the basis of the history itself, and we have to identify the type of shock. The first scenario is patient is presenting with fever with history revealing focal site of infection. This will be a distributive shock due to sepsis. Second scenario is hives, facial edema, dyspnea after exposure to allergens. This will again be a distributive shock, but in distributive shock, the cause will be anaphylaxis. Third scenario is patient presenting with exertional chest discomfort or is having palpitation with syncope or presyncope. This will be definitely a cardiogenic shock. Fourth is history of trauma or GI bleed leading to melena or hematemesis. This will lead to hypovolemic shock. Fifth scenario is a patient is known case of hypertension and presents with tearing chest pain and back pain with shock. This can be a obstructive shock due to, yes, tell me guys, this will be due to aortic dissection, which leads to outflow tract obstruction of the aorta. Now, after we have discussed the history, let's come on to the physical examination. When we consider the aim of physical examination, again, just like history, it has two aims, that is, first to identify the shock, whether it is present or not, and if present, whether it is in compensated state or decompensated state. If it is decompensated state, there will be signs of organ dysfunction. After we have confirmed the presence of shock, then we have to identify what type of shock is present. Either it is distributive, cardiogenic, obstructive, or hypovolemic shock. Now, when we consider the examination of compensated shock, it is usually having non-specific findings like increase in heart rate. This increase in heart rate is to increase the cardiac output for compensation, and increase in respiratory rate to compensate for metabolic acidosis. Now, this compensated shock has non-specific findings, but these are very important to be catched at time. Since the patient is in compensated state, he can recover via appropriate therapy and organ dysfunction can be avoided. So, increased heart rate, increased respiratory rate should not be missed by the clinician. Now, usually patients of shock also present with hypotension with mean arterial pressure of less than 60 millimeter of mercury. But not all the shock patients are characterized by hypotension. It can also be normotensive or even hypertensive. Example in cases of aortic dissection. Now, we have certain organs which are known as windows for shock identification. These organs are CNS, kidney, and skin. So, through examination of these organs, we can identify whether the patient is in compensated stage or decompensated stage. So, in CNS examination, decompensation is characterized by altered mental status. In kidneys, it is characterized by oliguria, and in skin, it is characterized by decreased capillary refill as well as cold clammy skin. Now guys, let's have a rapid fire round in which we will have scenario and we will have to identify the type of shock. This scenario will be based on the physical examination findings. If the patient has raised JVP with peripheral edema, it is right heart failure leading to cardiogenic shock. If the patient is having basal clefts on pulmonary auscultation and present with shock, it will be left heart failure and cardiogenic shock. S3 gallop can be seen in, again, cardiogenic shock. If the patient is having warm extremities, brisk capillary refill, bounding pulse, this means these are the signs of increased cardiac output. And we know only one shock type is associated with increased cardiac output, that is distributive shock. Like anaphylaxis, sepsis, etc. Reduced JVP can be seen with hypovolemic shock. On the other hand, raised JVP can be seen with right heart failure leading to cardiogenic shock. Cellulitis, abscess, or infected pressure site will be again distributive shock. Most commonly, this will lead to sepsis. All these conditions will lead to sepsis and distributive shock. Brady or tachyarrhythmia, if found on physical examination, will be a cause of cardiogenic shock. Large ecchymosis, which is hemorrhage, will lead to hypovolemic shock. And if the patient is having decreased breath sounds with deviation of trachea away, this will be pneumothorax, will lead to obstructive shock, which will lead to decreased venous return and obstructive shock. Now we have two important parameters for the patients of shock. First one is shock index. What is shock index? This is simply heart rate divided by systolic blood pressure. When we consider the normal values, the normal value lie between 0.5 to 0.7, and it is abnormal if it is more than 0.9, and it is a more sensitive indicator of transfusion requirement than heart rate or BP alone. It may also identify the patient who is at risk for post-intubation hypotension. Now the other parameter is Q-SOFA. It is quick SOFA score, that is sequential organ failure assessment. It has three parameters, that is altered mental status, which is characterized by GCS less than 15. Second is respiratory rate more than 22 per minute. And third is systolic BP less than 100 millimeter of mercury. If 2 out of 3 parameters are positive, then this Q-SOFA is positive and is associated with increased hospital stay and mortality. Increased hospital stay as well as increased mortality. And if these are positive, it should be followed by a detailed SOFA score, which has various clinical as well as lab parameters. Now, after we have seen the physical examination, let's see what all investigations are important in the patients of shock. These are important to identify the extent of organ dysfunction, what is the extent of organ dysfunction, and to find the possible etiology. So what all investigations are a must do for the every patient of a shock? First is lactate, then renal function test, liver function test, cardiac enzymes, complete blood count with differential count, PT, APTT, INR, urine analysis and urine sediments, arterial blood gas analysis, ECG, as well as echocardiography. So let's see the importance of lactate. It is a marker of anaerobic metabolism, and since shock patients have anaerobic metabolism, it can be used to identify shock, and the values more than 2 are specifically seen in patients of septic shock. Renal function test can help us identify organ dysfunction in the form of increased creatinine. There can be abnormal liver function test, for example, if there is elevated alkaline phosphatase. This can be seen with biliary obstruction. Now this biliary obstruction can be a sepsis focus and help us identify the distributive shock. Cardiac enzymes like troponin can be elevated in cardiogenic shock, which can be due to myocarditis, myocardial infarction, etc. Complete blood count with differential count can also help us give a clue that there is something wrong, like sepsis. PT, APTT, INR is also important. Urine analysis, urine sediment can help us identify UTI, which can be a cause of distributive shock. ABG can be done. Now the important point is ECG. ECG can show us either brady or tachyarrhythmias, ST elevation MI, S1Q3 T3 pattern, which is seen in pulmonary embolism, and low voltage along with electric alternance, which can be seen in pericardial tamponade. So this bradyotachyarrhythmias and ST elevation MI can lead to cardiogenic shock. On the other hand, pulmonary embolism, pericardial tamponade can lead to obstructive shock. So ECG is a very important investigation in patients of shock and should not be missed at any cost. Now, echo is a rapid and non-invasive test in which usually a transthoracic echocardiography is used involving 2D mode and M mode, which can identify LV function, RV function, as well as pericardium volume. Now friends, coming on to the very important part, that is the treatment of shock. First of all, we have to treat the patient simultaneously with efforts to elucidate the etiology. This is to prevent the patient landing up in the irreversible stage. So we have to start the treatment as soon as possible. The treatment should involve multidisciplinary team in a ICU setting. ICU. So the treatment is initially directed at undifferentiated shock, and later it is shock specific treatment according to the type. First, we have to gain adequate IV access. So this can be gained via peripheral venous cannula of 16 gauge or 18 gauge. This will help in two ways. First, we can give aggressive volume resuscitation, especially in the patients of distributive or hypovolemic shock. Also, if the patient is having sepsis leading to distributive shock, we can give him antibiotics. Now, we can also put a central venous catheter. It will help in the patients who are having hypotension despite volume resuscitation via a peripheral line. We can also give vasopressors and inotropes to this central venous catheter. Hemodynamic monitoring, that is central venous pressure, can be measured through this. Central venous oxygen saturation can be measured, and we can also place a Swan-Ganz catheter which can help us to measure the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, cardiac output and systemic vascular resistance. So these are the importance of central venous catheter. Now it is important to note that when a patient is very critically ill or amidst the cardiopulmonary arrest, the quickest method for central access is intraosseous. So intraosseous is the quickest method of central access. Arterial line should be placed for intravascular measurement of blood pressure and continuous determination of mean arterial pressure as well as arterial oxygen tension. Urinary catheter should be placed for hourly assessment of urine output, which will tell us the adequacy of resuscitation. Now coming on to the volume resuscitation, the aim of volume resuscitation is to restore the tissue perfusion and prevent irreversible damage. All shock types benefit, but mainly it is important for distributive and hypovolemic shock. It is important to note that if we do cautious volume resuscitation, it is also helpful in cardiogenic shock. Initially, the volume replacement is given according to 30 ml per kg of the predictive body weight. We first give crystalloids. Packed RBCs are given in the cases of hemorrhagic shock leading to hypovolemia if the hemoglobin is less than 7 gram per deciliter. FFP should be given to avoid dilution of the factors when we are giving packed RBCs. Now, how can we assess the volume status? It can be assessed by either passive leg raise test, in which the patient lies in semi-recumbent position with 45 degrees leg raise, and then there is immediate assessment of changes in cardiac output after the leg raise within 1 minute. We have to assess the changes in cardiac output after the leg raised within the 1 minute. Second method by which we can assess the volume status is echocardiography, and we can also assess it by inferior vena cava diameter and collapse. If it is collapsible, then the patient is dehydrated, and if it is not collapsible, then it is adequate volume. Similarly, IVC diameter, if it is more than 2.5 centimeter, then the volume is adequate. Less than 1.5 centimeter, there is hypovolemia. Now coming on to vasopressor and inotropic support, these are to be given if there is hypotension despite volume resuscitation. So for cardiogenic shock, dobutamine is a first line agent which is having beta 1 and beta 2 mediated effects. This beta 1 effect will lead to increased inotropic effect, and the beta 2 mediated effects will lead to vasodilation leading to decreased afterload. Both of these will help in increasing the cardiac output. Also, dobutamine can be used with noradrenaline in mixed shock, that is mixed distributive and cardiogenic shock. Now, when we consider the distributive shock, our aim is to increase the systemic vascular resistance, which is being decreased in distributive shock. So, for this, the first choice drug is noradrenaline because it has alpha 1 and beta 1 adrenergic effects. Alpha 1 will lead to vasoconstriction, leading to increase in systemic vascular resistance, and the beta 1 will lead to positive inotropic as well as positive chronotropic effects. Now, another agent which can be used in distributive shock is vasopressin. It acts on vasopressin receptor to reverse the vasodilation which is present in distributive shock, leading to decrease in systemic vascular resistance. So it is helpful in increasing the systemic vascular resistance. It is safe as a second line agent for use in distributive shock. When we consider the dopamine, it has no role as the first line agent in distributive shock. So in cardiogenic shock, the main drug is dobutamine, and distributive shock, the first choice drug is noradrenaline and second line is vasopressin. Now coming on to oxygenation and ventilatory support, what is the cause of hypoxemia in different types of shock? In distributive shock, hypoxemia can be due to primary pulmonary processes like pneumonia. In cardiogenic shock or obstructive shock, it can be due to LV dysfunction leading to elevated pulmonary capillary wedge pressure. In ARDS, it can be due to ventilation perfusion mismatch and intrapulmonary shunting. As we have already discussed in the lecture of ARDS, what is the pathophysiology behind these two mechanisms? The target SpO2 we have to keep is 92 to 95%, which can be maintained via oxygen inhalation, or if not maintained by oxygen inhalation, we can give mechanical ventilation via intubation. Now, antibiotics are important for shock because sepsis and septic shock are the most common cause of shock. Not only distributive shock, these are the most common causes of shock overall. So any undifferentiated shock, we will suspect septic shock and will start broad spectrum antibiotics after obtaining the appropriate culture samples. But when the sepsis is excluded as the cause of shock, we will withdraw all antibiotics. Now let's see certain specific therapy if we have identified the cause of shock. If there is distributive shock due to anaphylaxis, we will remove the inciting agent. We will give epinephrine, IV fluids, vasopressors and steroids if it is due to adrenal insufficiency. If the cardiogenic shock is there due to arrhythmias, we will follow advanced cardiac life support algorithm and we can need cardiac pacemaker. If the cardiogenic shock is due to MI, we have to do revascularization. If the cardiogenic shock is due to valve dysfunction, we will have to do emergency valve replacement surgery. Obstructive shock due to tension pneumothorax, we will immediately decompress. Obstructive shock due to pulmonary embolism, we will require thrombolytic therapy or surgical removal.